Good evening. On behalf of Friends of Chamber Music of Troy, New York, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's performance in context. I'm Jennifer Laursen. I'm chair of programming for Friends of Chamber Music and the host for tonight's event and all of the performance in context broadcasts that we've done. Working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly is the Friends of Chamber Music president, Julia Alsaraf, and Kat Pollen. Thanks to our many donors, both large and small, Friends of Chamber Music is able to offer this full season of virtual events for free. If you would like to make a donation, you may do so from our website, www.friendsofchambermusic.org. We're honored to bring you a conversation with two amazingly innovative and deep musicians, Maria Finkelmeier and Jean Laurenz. Their collaborative film project together entitled Descended will be premiered on YouTube on our YouTube channel on Saturday, January 16th at 7:30 p.m. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Maria. Would you
Hi.
introduce yourself? And Jean?
Hi, everyone.
Um, we're going to have a chance to hear about Descended, their project together, their collaboration, but we're going to begin at the very beginning because something everybody wants to know who is not a classical musician. How does one become a classical musician? So I'm going to ask both of you to tell us a little about your earliest experience with classical music.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you so much for hosting, Jennifer, and a big thanks to the Friends of Chamber Music Troy community for really pivoting and creating such rich materials for us to create and collaborate with, and just to have this opportunity to talk to you and your audience is really an honor. So thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Man, let's go back to the beginning, shall we? How do we get started? Well, I will say that I am extremely grateful for my parents. They are not musically inclined or artistic, but did start my brother and I in piano at a really young age. My brother's 5 years older. He started drums, and then when it was kind of my turn to pick an instrument in band, I really liked percussion, and I kind of said, "Hey, can I do this too?" And I grew up in Ohio, which was a very kind of band and marching band centric culture. So I kind of did all of the marching stuff, and I played snare drum with 200 people on a football field. And then on weekends, I would go down and I played in the Cincinnati Youth Orchestra. So really, the youth orchestra in Cincinnati was my first kind of exposure to strings and an orchestral landscape. And I really remember the richness of that sound that really differed from my experience in school. And I immediately fell in love with that richness, that kind of symphonic sound. And it became very natural for me to major in music for my undergrad. I went to Ohio State University, and I had an amazing mentor, Dr. Susan Powell there. It was really important for me to learn from a female artist, and she really took me under her wing in those first, those 4 years of my bachelor's degree, and maybe naively went straight to my master's. I had no idea what I wanted to do with music, not even a thing. I was just told I was very good. So I will fully admit that I was kind of just led to the next. And I think if I would put all joking aside, I was still just very hungry to learn. I didn't. I was in school very focused on that skill building set, that kind of just getting my hands on as many different pieces of music and understanding my craft. I pursued that master's degree to really try to understand my own identity with everything. And then after 2 years, like, I still had no idea. So I ended up traveling to Sweden. Actually, I lived in Sweden for the first 3 years after graduation, and ended up studying improvisation and composition there, exploring Europe, and being one who doesn't speak a language in a country and trying to exist was a extremely beneficial and like kind of soul expanding experience. But I will have to say that first exposure to classical music in high school kind of feeling the power of 50 musicians on stage. I also, as a percussionist, felt so much joy being able to like play the triangle at that one moment that gives you the goosebumps. Like that for me was so cool. So I found a lot of joy in the nuance of my instrument family, and am grateful to be sustaining a career in some way, shape, or form with that background.
So I have one follow-up question to that one. I understand that most percussionists start on the marimba. And is that true?
Um, I started on drum set actually. I played piano and then I started playing drum set. I think just because we had it in our house,
Mhm.
and trying to get the coordination down. But I did was introduced to marimba in high school and started to really. That's kind of once you start to play that instrument, I feel like you there's this it was that transition of taking things seriously, if I can say that, of like really digging in, really taking private lessons, and then understanding kind of solo repertoire that you could play. But if those who know me and know of my skills definitely come at my career from a marimba standpoint, like, oh, you play the marimba. The people in my building of where I practice are like, you're the girl that plays marimba. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. So yeah.
So Jean, what led you to the trumpet, and how did you get into classical music?
So my story starts not too distant from Maria's. Actually, my first memory of music is actually from a drum. And in my elementary school, the local high school band came and they always sit the youngest kids the furthest in the front. And I was in kindergarten or first grade, and I got to sit right in front of the bass drum. And we're sitting on the floor, and I remember the kid played it, and it shook. It actually physically vibrates you, especially as a little 5-year-old. And I remember being very taken by that. It was a strong memory. And I went home and I think I told my mom, I think, oh, I heard the band today and it shook my heart. And I think maybe it sounded metaphorical, but it was just literal. Like it actually like I felt like some movement. But it was a very vivid memory for me. So I think that was my first like I really want to do this. And then I started on violin in the fourth grade. I moved to the trumpet for a variety of reasons, nothing too particular. I'm drawn to soprano instruments and soprano sounds, treble clef, and my best friend and I wanted to play the same instrument and sit next to each other, and we both tried the trumpet out and we're okay at it. And I actually have one of my left hand is smaller than my right hand. I was born um, with I'm missing a joint in some of my fingers, and so I couldn't play the clarinet or the flute, and my choices were actually percussion, trombone, and trumpet in terms of instruments that I could physically play. And so I chose the trumpet, and it really shaped me from there on out. And I also started singing. You'll hear in the film on Saturday that there's some vocalizations and singing. Started singing in high school, and I find that my vocal range is identical to my trumpet range. It's a female soprano instrument, and I just kind of grew both. I went to Northwestern University, majored in trumpet performance, but also choral music ed, became an elementary school music teacher. Thank goodness for music teachers out there. Thank you if you are listening and you are one. After that, I decided that I loved my job. I loved teaching, but I missed playing trumpet. So I went to Yale for my master's, and I got an artist diploma there. And then from there, it was kind of using my theater roots, my singing roots, and my trumpet roots, and trying to braid the three in a way that was different. At first, I was really shy about it, but then as I grew and became more confident in the uniqueness of the separate skills, I started to bring them together and then do some crazy cool stuff.
So you talked a little about how hard it was, Maria, to figure out what you were as an artist when you got out of school and you spent some time experimenting a little. Can you tell me if collaboration played a role in your persistence, or in what way it was important?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think um, collaboration has always played a big role. I think it's in tandem with my personality type. I find energy from humans, which is why the pandemic has been very hard for so many of us. But I feel just a physical energy from being around a different person. So that is kind of aligned with who I am holistically. And then collaboratively, I feel that I love to be challenged. Like I need to be challenged. I need to be like trying something new at all times, which I think is also aligned with my fascination with percussion, right? Percussion isn't one instrument, it's anything that you can find resonance in and create something that's like sonically melodic or rhythmic. And I think that I'm realizing as I kind of progress that those fascinations kind of manifest in different ways, whether that's, finding humans to collaborate with or finding like materials to collaborate with. I think the what led me to continue my studies or kind of question my studies almost is I always felt like I'm also very good at following directions and rules. So throughout my schooling, I was playing repertoire, playing how my teachers told me to play, and which was extremely valuable. But I was always asking like, then who am I? What do I bring to this? And I think the kind of those first couple of years out of school in which I moved to Sweden, lived in the woods, it was like dark almost all year. I was being challenged by my environment, but also interacting with people that had a very different upbringing than I did, or even association with music or musical education. And those collaborations opened my eyes to, there are many, many different tracks, many, many different approaches to get to a single point. For me, that was a big deal to realize, and not just realize or read about or think about, but just to physically experience. And then I started to, okay, if I expand my bubble a little bit, I'm working mostly with musicians, but what if I worked with technicians, audio technicians, or engineers, or architects, or all of these, what if I then challenged myself beyond that musical challenge or that chamber music challenge or that kind of thing. So I feel that I also have big dreams. Like I've big ideas. I want to do big things. I want to reach as many people as I can. And there's no way I'm ever going to be able to do that as an individual. And the more I find, people like Jean, that we are just, so excited about each other and our art together, the more I can find those people, I hold on very tightly to them, because that's the only way that we can make a greater impact, is if we do kind of push each other up and along to kind of create these art pieces.
So Jean, you said you began to do all these crazy things. Were you ever afraid? And were you? I feel the same thing for you, Maria. I know whenever I do something, I'm terrified, and then I pull it off, and I think, phew, if I pull it off with few mistakes or without a big disaster,
right?
that at some point a person becomes more brave. Would you talk a little about that, Jean, as it applied to your?
Yes. Well, the answer to your question is constantly afraid. I think actually for me, the fear mostly came from the question that we're asked at a very, very young age and continuously throughout youth, which is, what are you going to be when you grow up? Mm-hmm. I was scared of that question because I was scared of this feeling that I had that there was supposed to be an answer, especially one answer, like a one-word answer. And so the fear for me constantly came from, well, what am I going to say? I mean, and then in all of my steps along the way, I kept telling myself I was going to narrow my interest down. I was going to whittle it down to, maybe I'll just be a trumpet player, but I also like to teach and sing, and I like to be on stage and do theater and dance and read poetry. And I kept promising myself that in the next place, I would narrow the funnel, but it never happened. And it took me until I was like 28, 29, when I said out loud alone to myself, I am what I'm going to be when I grow up. And And that what that thing is just a lot of things. And I called myself a patchwork artist. And I see people, some people want to play the piano and they want to play the piano. And the analogy I make is some people want to build a really big snowball where they roll that skill and they build it bigger and bigger. But I want to build a wall of snowballs and have a lot of little things that I can do okay, but put them all together and make something. And so, going back to your question, yes, I was always very frightened of the unknown. I'm not from a musical or artist based family. Many engineers and people in the health industry, so there's that extremely big unknown of what does a career and a job even look like. But I think, and you'll see this in the film, we address the feeling of fear and we address the beauty that is inside of it. And I think that looking at fear now, I see it as a beautiful thing, even if I couldn't back then. But yes, I was constantly afraid every day.
I still are. Like I still, but without, I think when you're afraid, it means you're doing something daring and rich and meaningful. And that's exciting, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm still afraid. I'm always afraid I've bitten off more than I can chew. I guess that's the fear.
Yeah.
But what's the worst that can happen?
Right. Right.
I hope that you will tell us a little about your past projects. If you have some slides to show that you've done some very big ones, some that would terrify me.
Sure. Well, I have a little video I can share that's like a 1 minute, and then I can share a little bit about what those projects are specifically. So I will pull this up. So what you'll see here is a kind of a portfolio reel is what I call it. You'll see, large scale works from lighting up a bridge with an original musical score, from playing on Fenway Park to 100 percussionists outside playing the music of John Luther Adams, to teaching kids electronic bucket drumming by driving a school bus around. I did that for like 3 years.
That's cool.
But here is a little taste of my background and previous works. And there we go. All right. Just so the YouTube gremlins don't all of a sudden take over your screen. I'll stop that screen share. But so I actually I'll tell a little story about connecting some of these projects, and also kind of thinking about your idea of being afraid and fear and failure, because not all of these projects that you just saw were quote unquote successes, and I think that is actually something really interesting to talk about. So one of the first kind of outdoor works I did was the first slide you saw was it's a percussion trio playing under this like UFO that's in the middle of Sweden. That is actually a tree house that's built, and we've figured out that an hour and a half away from where I lived in Sweden at the time was the Tree Hotel that was 6 like Norwegian architects built, or Norwegian and Finnish and Scandinavian architects built these like beautiful tree houses in the middle of the woods. And I thought, what if we wrote music for all these tree houses and played them under each tree house? Really, playing marimbas and drums and very kind of contemporary classical music. And what's interesting is we did the project, it was beautiful, but nobody came. Not one, like 4 people came to the event, right? And and I was, for me, that was, I had the fear, but I did the project, and that was quote unquote a failure when it comes to kind of our measure of success. But we filmed them. And what's interesting is the director of a festival here in Boston saw those videos and then invited me to create a project for a festival here, in which led to playing on the backside of Fenway Park and commissioning 12 composers, including myself, to write for the stadium as an instrument. So I find interesting is I did not predict anything like this in my career, but one thing definitely had led to the other. The curiosity to bring classical music out into natural spaces led to, an opportunity to think about a physical space, a stadium, as a musical instrument. Then led to what I'm about to do next week, which is project an original video and sound score onto the Hat Shell in Boston. So it's like each project kind of leaves a seed of inspiration for what is possible, and kind of also offers a new toolkit of skills and experiences and collaborators. So kind of thinking of percussion ensemble in the concert hall, to percussion ensemble out in the middle of the woods, to like percussion ensemble on a stadium, to like video projection and sound installation, is kind of each led to each other in a really organic way. And even similarly, how Jean and I met was, Jean experiencing an art piece and then thinking, well, I want to do that, and then had this really beautiful story to bring, and subject and an idea to bring to the table. So so similar to what Jean was saying, is like, it's very hard to identify. I've tried to call myself a lot of different things. I'm landing right now on like public artist, percussionist, composers, the 3 words I use right now, which will change in about 2 years, I'm sure. But that's just a bit of a sampling of some previous work.
So Jean, how do you choose your projects?
Sometimes I choose them and sometimes they choose me. But in the past, I was a gig artist, and I started just playing orchestras, playing, in whatever would hire me. And then I'm now the assistant professor of trumpet at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And with that comes some research expectations and some opportunities for funding. So what you'll see on Saturday came through the University of Wisconsin-Madison as a funding source to support musical and artistic research, which we are the luckiest people in the world if creation of art is called research for us. I've only I choose what I want to do only sometimes. In the past, I've helped assisted in creating a concert series that pairs music and cocktails, and we had a mixologist, and I've always sort of looked for multisensory experiences in my search for my own creations. And so pairing ththings, I did a show that I auditioned for, so it more chose me, but it was in Switzerland, and it was a 45 to 50 minute dance and chamber music piece where there were 2 professional dancers and 6 musicians. We went through intensive dance training. It was called Diva Mania, and the whole concert piece, or I should call it performance piece, was about an Andy Warhol quote in the question, the idea that at one point everybody will find 15 minutes of fame. And so from that experience, I had to learn how to really dance, and we had to be on stage. I was playing my trumpet. I was a character. I was also a dancer and a singer. And then from there, I started realizing that I could find these multisensory experiences, and I've created a few since, but hopefully many more to come.
So this wasn't one of the questions I gave you ahead of time, but it just dawned on me that in a way, what you both do is curate experiences. And I feel like there is a big connection with what an educator does when they're constructing a course that's meaningful to their students, and this other thing that you're doing in a public way to bring an experience to everyone. What do you think about that?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
how does your experimentation and collaborative work, how does it affect your teaching?
Yeah. I think they go hand in hand. And often, whether I'm approaching a class, like, think there's an art to any sort of human experience, right? There's a way to introduce people to a room, to a space, to make them feel comfortable, to like bring them on an emotional journey with you, to like feel like you're holding their hand, but you're also letting for some free exploration. I think what Jean and I having that educator background like allows us to also kind of almost design think or reverse engineer, like put ourselves in that student position. And I think we're thinking a lot about that as when we're teaching, but also when we're kind of curating or creating or trying to create an experience. Um, I think often my students would say I'm a performer. So I feel like they would actually say kind of the same statement in the opposite way, which takes a lot of it's very exciting for both ways. Yeah.
So,
Oh,
oh
sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one way that I think is really great, a great thing about Maria's work, and the reason why the one time I experienced her work in Boston, I wasn't in Boston for very long. I saw a show, I left, it did not leave my mind. And so, and the reason why I loved that show so much was because I felt like I left with more questions than I came with. And in art and in teaching, I feel like creating and generating very deep thought provoking questions is so important, and you want people to come in excited to ask, offer them substance that's meaningful, and then have them leave with more, and then so that creates this growing cycle of human development, and I think that's why I think teaching is such an art in itself.
Mhm. I agree.
Mm.
I will say, Maria, when I saw you play, it was 6 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and you were with Hub New Music,
Oh,
and it never left me.
wow.
I remembered it this many years since, which is why I invited you to
Oh,
do this season.
oh,
So
that's thank you for sharing that. It means a huge amount.
yeah, it was absolutely true.
Oh, thank you.
Um, I want to know about how these big projects come about. I'd like you to tell how you work with the community, and I'm assuming that you have a lot of negotiations and permits, and you have to think about safety issues. Um, can you talk a little about that?
Absolutely. So the there there's a lot of I have to find a lot of joy in a lot of various tasks. So I do try to find as much joy in creating the art and vision as it is talking to the community or talking to a presenter or curator or commissioner or city council person or the person who traverses that road all the time and finds ownership over that space. I have to make sure that person feels like I'm not invading their space. And there's different levels of all of those things, whether it's permitting or talking to the community in various projects, but they're all very important. I can share a little bit just because this is some experience I'm having right now. I'm working with the Esplanade Association in Boston to create this public piece in at the Hat Shell, and there's a list of about 10 supporters and sponsors. Those come from like state departments. So the first thing I think about if I'm thinking about a project is if it's at a specific site, I have to think about who owns that site. And that looks at like officially, is it state owned? Is it city owned? Is it privately owned? So you find out who that person is. And then you try to, if it's private, you talk to that space or that, there's a lot of friends of organizations. Luckily, when, for example, the park that I'm working in this week is state owned, but the organization is able to kind of offer those connections. Um, and and then there's that passively owned, right? Who's the community that owns that space? And I've often will work for a very long time. So at least 6 months before you see a project, that project has been actively, and by active, I mean every day, there's work being done. And I've done either there's a lot of time I physically spend on that in that space, and I'll actually talk to people. This is pre-pandemic, but I've done projects with the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University in Jamaica Plain, and I spent a lot of time just in the park. Who are these people? We did kind of open rehearsals or kind of open conversations so they feel connected to me, and I'm not an artist that suddenly comes into that community and expresses something, but I'm an artist that has done their best to be a part of the community, be a part of the human like circles that find home in that space, and therefore I'm doing the work in tandem with that community as opposed to for that community. Similarly, when I'm doing my educational work, I had the project called the Beat Bus. We drove around, we taught electronic bucket drumming to schools and community centers. I made sure that you make sure your team reflects the communities you're going into. So I'm a white woman. I was very conscious of that and tried to create interns, team members that would reflect communities if I were going to communities of color, to respect those communities. Again, to say not, I'm bringing my art and you should like it, but we are wanting to make art with you. Would you like to come and make art with us? And that's very, it's very important to me. And I think it's respect. It's a respect to the communities that you're trying to serve. And it's as important to me as the art itself, right? Like, yeah, I want to show you some really great music and I want you to play music or listen to music or kind of experience this, but I also want you to feel empowered and feel that you're, as a part of this experience as I am as a performer or teacher.
As a partner in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's really, really important.
Yes.
So I wanted to know also how all of your work has been on site, often site specific. Mm-hmm. From a business standpoint, do you come up with an idea and pitch it to, I don't know, the State Park Association or a community, or do they commission you to do a work? How does that come about?
That's both is the simple answer. So I find it, if I am pitching a project, that also means I'm fundraising for the project. So that would mean, I've done like, I've definitely done that. Sorry, I was thinking of some examples in my head and trying to decide if I should share all of them with you or not, which would take a while. But there was on June 21st, I used to produce and curate this big festival. We would do like 40 to 80 musical events outside in Boston on the summer solstice. And it's this kind of festival that's international. And I would kind of always do 4 big projects. And that would mean, there was a group we collected called Too Many Trombones. I worked with BU professors and it was like 30 trombonists, which is just a fantastic sound, especially so good. And we would, I would work with Gabe and Neil and their group, and we would say, okay, well, where should we go? And we would actually identify the places around the city. And I've, since the first iteration of that festival, just started to know who are the park department, the chief of the parks commissioner. We were buds for a while. He moved on, but you started to know. I got to know the electricians that come, and if I need amplification, who turns on the box at the park to allow us to have electricity. And it took a lot of kind of boots on the ground, calling, getting through some red tape. But you also just realize those are just humans. They're trying to do the best that they can with their job, and you just try to meet them where they are and be really respectful. When it comes to kind of being afraid, I had to kind of just, my dad would say, pull on your big girl pants and just figure it out. You just do that and you find the phone number and you just, humbly say, this is what I'm looking for. And those experiences and those networks then grow. And now I'm at a place where I do get asked, like, can you pitch a project? hey, we're thinking of this. Would you come in and tell us what you're thinking or what could be done? And those moments are just like, whew, I feel so privileged to be able to do that. And those permitting processes tend to be like a little easier because I was asked to do the work. But similarly, they would have never existed had I not really spent my first few years here in Boston, like making those phone calls and trying to figure out how to make this stuff work. Um, but both are equally exciting to me. Like if the seed just comes from me, like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Or if the seed comes from, hey, we have this park or this site or this building, what would you do with it? I think um, there's excitement to both types of entry points.
I want to know about the way you've taken this work um, during social isolation. Like both of you, how has your work changed? How have you continued to do it? Have you learned new things that you want to continue forward with?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll start because I think we could also talk so deeply about Descended because the work has changed drastically because of the pandemic and in such a beautiful way. And but I will start by just saying the beginning of the pandemic I didn't create for like those first 2 months. I didn't. And I remember feeling very guilty. Like everything got canceled. I didn't know what to do. My daughter didn't have childcare. Like we were just trying to make things happen. And that also offered me this moment to appreciate because I think the lifestyle of Gina and I is very fast paced, constantly going. And then all of a sudden I was forced to stop everything. And where now that we're like a year after it, I can in reflection say I'm excited for that huge pause. I'm thankful for that pause button. Thankful and excited are the wrong words. I don't know what the right word is, but I'm trying to find the silver lining of that pause moment because it's allowed me to reflect upon like relationships with Jean that are really like we're both in it and we're both like so passionate and Jean's pulling on her big girl pants too and making phone calls and we're all we're really dedicated to being afraid and taking those risks and it allowed me the space to just say yes, like I want to continue this collaboration. There's these four things okay, like really kind of addressing my lifestyle from a standpoint of what do I want to make sure survives,
Mhm.
right? And how do I want to frame my work life balance when we do get back and up and running, thanks to our scientific community, by the way, because
Yes.
we're going to get back up and running. And then to fantastic organizations such as the Friends of Chamber Music Troy, who said, we're going to allow you to survive this pandemic, artists, and create opportunities for you. So I think the pandemic has forced this shift perspective that I hope to take very seriously for the rest of my life. I hope to remember this year in a way that and take what it's taught me about life, about art, about what's important.
Yeah, it feels like hopefully this is a silver lining approach, but what I felt like when the pandemic hit was, again, like Maria said, an opportunity to reset or just push pause, and it felt as if my phone or my computer was running really slow because too many apps were open or too many pieces of software were running, and everything was just wearing and driving down, and I felt like my creativity was kind of in a gridlock. And then the pandemic hit, shut the device down and restart, and you have a little bit of space and time to really reflect. And it's something that I will never take for granted again. I hope is that time, the significant time for reflection, which helped drive Descended towards this new space that um, is very different and exciting. And Maria and I had been working pretty hard on a performance piece. We workshopped the work as a live performance multimedia piece, and we were pushing for it to become, you know, something that we could really take on the road. And then the pandemic hit, and of course, that horizon looks much further away. And so we dove deeply into this film, which has become really very quite exciting. And then it again, more space for the mind and more space for your physical body to be in one place. I'm a member of Seraph Brass, which is an all female touring brass ensemble, and we're always on the road. And now that performance part of my life shut down, which you know, it's really sad when that happens, but you know, you close those doors and other doors open, and I think that I see the beauty in the space that has been given, and I'm hoping that when we come back, we can find the beauty in both worlds and smash them together and have a grand old time.
So this brings us to your art piece that audiences, all of you who are listening tonight, will get to see on Saturday, 7:30 sharp. We're going to begin on our YouTube channel as a YouTube premiere. Could you tell us about how it originated and tell us just a little about it? Don't spoil the any secret endings.
Sure. Jean, I would love for you to start if you want to just tell us about Lafcadio and
Sure.
yeah.
So Lafcadio Hearn is a pretty well-known writer. He died in 1904, but he is very remembered and celebrated in Japan still, which is where he wound up at the end of his life. But he was a 19th century writer, very well known in some small pockets of the United States, in big pockets in Japan. And he's been compared to Edgar Allan Poe and Walt Whitman in terms of his literature. But because, for a variety of reasons, he's kind of, you know, fallen under the halo of the known. And he is this incredible story, an incredible life, and he mostly is remembered for his ghost stories and folk spiritual stories that he would translate from other languages and other cultures. And you know, somebody said once that he was a protector of endangered spirit worlds, which means he would go to places where the large mass white culture were spreading over the world and kind of pushing down these other cultures. And he would go to those sort of those underrepresented spaces and write down folk stories, ghost stories, songs, cultural reflections that he found. And so he's preserved so much of the spirit world of people who, you know, in some cases, these cultures don't, their memory exists in a non-literal way. For example, what was the name of the voodoo witch?
Marie Laveau.
Yeah, Marie Laveau, the last living voodoo witch. He was able to interview her, and he wrote her obituary. And you know, I know that seems long, but that's a small inkling of what he is. And so I wanted to find a way to reflect not only what he wrote about, but who he was and his multidimensionality into a piece of musical, visual, sonic art. And that's where when I received the opportunity to do this, I remembered Maria, and I said, I don't have any details, but this guy's cool. I like what you do. Can we make cool stuff happen?
Well, also note that he's your great-great-granduncle.
Yes. Oh, did I not mention that?
Yeah.
It's my great-great-granduncle. My grandmother's maiden name is Hearn, and so there's a close family connection and a lineage there that is deeply meaningful to our family.
Yeah.
What about you, Maria?
Yeah. So sorry, I'm just thinking of how fascinating Lafcadio is. So essentially, Jean had this subject matter, this family tie, this extreme talent. Like, Jean is an incredible vocalist and an incredible trumpet player. So like, going into our makeshift studio this summer, we recorded the music, we recorded the album, and in our friend's house, we all quarantined and then like hunkered down together. And I remember the engineer going, whew, like as soon as she started playing.
Mm.
And so I just can't wait for you to hear. But diving into a literary character that is so rich and deep, like has been an immense honor. I think what you're going to hear this on Saturday, you'll hear two of the musical pieces that we've is a special performance for the chamber music series that we're excited for you to see. We recorded Satellite, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And then you'll see this art film that has been created in collaboration with 410 Media, and it is an art film. It stars Jean as the main character, and it is our own interpretation, reflection, representation of the essence that is Lafcadio. I would, encourage to do some Googling because his literature is all over the internet. You can read like it's In a Drop of Dew, At Hakata. What are some of our other favorites? Those are my two favorites. Of Moon Desire. So just these are things that if you want to get into the mindset of where we were and are when creating the music, creating the performance, or directing the film, reading his work would be a great place to start.
Doing some Googling. I'm definitely going to do some Googling.
Yeah. And the New York, I will also mention the New Yorker did a great profile of him 2 years ago, I think, right when we really started the discussion. So he does, I think Jean has mentioned to me a lot, he comes back every kind of decade in this way. Kind of his work is not lost in the sense that there are these like really, these pockets of people that are really into his work, and it kind of bubbles every once in a while.
So how did he end up in Japan, by the way? What was he doing in Japan?
He went on an assignment, for a writing assignment originally, and that's basically what his life was. He was a true nomad, and he started in Cincinnati, and I should say in America. He was born in Greece, and he moved around Europe, came to Cincinnati, went to New Orleans, spun around the West Indies for a while, and had all these little bursts of moving, and then he, because he was so deeply connected to different cultures and communities, he got a lot of writing assignments, and so he was asked to go on to Japan on assignment. He had been very deeply fascinated in Buddhist inflected work leading up to this assignment, and he had asked to go, but I think when it came time for him to actually go, it was a gig.
Yeah. Cool.
I will say too, yeah, that his writings are they are dark. I feel like you are experiencing the personality of Jean and I at the moment, but you'll see that the art reflects this character that we have researched, that Jean is connected to by blood, that we are trying to understand more fully, and it's dark work. He was half blind in his left eye. He had been abandoned when he was young. His association with ghosts, the spirit world, which is why he became very good friends with Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen in New Orleans. He was very connected to trying to understand the spirit world, or feeling like he was a part of the spirit world. So when kind of landing in Japan, you can see his connection to the Buddhist mentality come through his work because of his lifelong fascination with what is the next world, what is the other, what happens when we close our eyes. So the film itself and the music itself does reflect that in a very strong way.
So I hope you all will tune in.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too much, but I just don't want you to expect like our jazz hands.
So I am personally interested in the way artists think about their role in society, and how you think. what you think about your role in society.
Mm.
How do you seek relevance? And you've talked a little about this, both of you have talked about this, um, in understanding the community around you, being respectful and listening.
Mhm.
But would you talk a little bit more about this? I think it's really important. Friends of Chamber Music has been thinking about it, the board has. How do we stay relevant, and how do we go about making art accessible and meaningful to communities around us?
Mhm. Well, I think at the core, no matter what medium we choose, we are all storytellers in some way, shape, or form, right? We're all trying to express a narrative or an experience or an emotion or a memory. And we've chosen primarily to do that through music. And I think Jean and I both have interest in multisensory, so music plus other identities. But I think what is important to me is to tell stories that are important to who I am, the world that I've experienced, or the world that has been experienced through collaborators such as Jean. So Jean brought this subject matter, and therefore we're diving deeply, and then we're trying to tell the story of this writer, of this lineage. I think a lot about making sure when I'm telling a story, it is connected to who I am or to my experience, or if I'm interpreting the music of another, I am bringing myself into that in a way that is bringing relevance to that moment. And then I think it's important, and I think a lot about then how does that become expressed? And that's what my fascination with music in the public space is my attempt to answer that question of how to, you know, I think the word accessible is the word we're using right now, but I think to maybe that our art, the art I make, doesn't feel scary, or you're not afraid to go experience it. You can just experience it in ways that feel very natural to one's lifestyle that is of the modern age. Like, you know, right now we're experiencing art digitally, and that is become the way we can find it most easily. But I'm constantly trying to say, I don't want there to be barriers between the art I make and you, and how can I find ways to produce it that makes it aligned with a lifestyle to go and experience.
Mhm.
And I can add, I think Maria really hit it home when she said it has to be relevance can only come from your story and your authenticity, and we can only share what is meaningful and relevant to us, and that may be a hit or miss to the people who come, but if it's really meaningful to you, the chances of it being meaningful to somebody else is likely.
Mm.
And one mistake I see some organizations or groups making is they try to pre-prescribe relevance, where they're saying, I think this community would like this, and we're going to go over here, but that community might like that. And instead of just being like, I love this, let me share it with you. And just a really maybe random but quick example is we've all had somebody say something to us in our lives, and maybe it wasn't very profound, but it stuck and it changed us. And for me, I used to be a bugler at a horse race track. That was like my college summer gig. And, and I do my homework and all my work in between the races. And there was a party after the day of races one day, and everybody's like, "Are you gonna go?" And I was like, "Oh no, I just have way too much work to do." This is when I was 19. And I thought I could check all of those boxes in every day. I really actually thought I could do that. And there's a guy whose whole job was just to scoop up horse poop, just pick it up and throw it out. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Honey, work is always going to be there for you." And then he kept going, and I was like, "You're right." It's always going to be there. It's never going to stop. And so that's just an example of he was just speaking his truth, and it got to me. And I don't think he was trying to be relevant or profound or anything. He just was speaking the truth, and I caught it. And I think that's kind of what relevance means. It means listening not only to what's around you, but deeply to yourself inside of what's around you.
So we may have some questions here. I see 4 down here. No, we do not have any questions. I'd like to open up the rest of this evening to questions. I'll give people a minute. While we're waiting, maybe I'll go on a little bit. So what you just said, Maria, about what you strive for, and Jean, so it seems like it's authenticity and removing barriers.
Absolutely.
And this is something I think you have an advantage when you do something out in a public space, a place where people already are.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
As long as it's not too far out, like in the woods where you only have
Live and learn. See, I learned. This is the whole thing. I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't do that project. Now
we have learned that when we do things over Zoom, we often get, because we record it and keep it on our website for a while, that we have twice as many people attending.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's the barrier, right? The accessibility, the moment that says I can, engage in this and it's in my living room. That's really exciting. Like that's something I think we'll take from this 2020, the pandemic year, further is how can we, remove that barrier of having to get into that concert hall to experience that, and we can have it on our screen.
Yeah, it's sometimes tricky to think what's going to bring somebody to the venue, somebody who it's another part of town for them. They don't know how to get there. They're not sure what they're going to see. And there are all sorts of challenges.
There are. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I were to say the main thing you strive for, what would it be?
The main thing we strive for, that is, I will actually have to say vulnerability. I think I'm trying to understand that as I get older and as I just say, this is who I am, or maybe authenticity, if we want to try a different word, is just to, kind of coming of age in the classical training. I'm very thankful for it because it was very intense, but I was always comparing myself to someone else, always. And I was never as good as. And I think what I want to strive for now is to own my strengths and my weaknesses and kind of realize that I don't have to be the fastest marimba player on the face of the earth, but I do have a story. I do have passion. And I do have some art to share and a story to share. And so maybe I want to strive for authenticity and being thankful for what I am able to do and share.
I totally agree. And I was just looking through my phone for a picture that I took when Maria and I were recording the album, and I crashed with Maria, and there was a plaque in her office where I was crashing, and there were words or little letters that were put in. Maria, are you? Is it next to you?
I don't know if it's probably a different saying.
No,
it says,
nope, that's it. That's what
it.
I strive for.
Yeah.
Do good work and share it with people.
Yep.
And I saw that hanging on Maria's wall. Took a picture of it. I was like, how beautifully put.
Yeah.
Do good work and share it with people.
Yeah.
Just show up.
Yeah. So we have a question from Robert Serenka. He says, how do you keep your motivation to be creative during the pandemic? And does the lack of a live audience affect your creative energy?
Yes. I definitely while I appreciate the accessibility that digital experiences allow, I think we are all going to be rushing back to sit shoulder to shoulder with a stranger. And we are performers are going to have so much fire in our bellies to get on stage for you. Because I will say, what do we strive for? Authenticity and human connection. So if I can, I'm changing my answer, everybody, because I mean, we're collaborators at our core because, like I mentioned at the very beginning, like you feel that vibration, that energy from another person. You feel that person pushing you, and that's why live performance is so engaging. There's no two that are exactly the same. The audience is a character in that story, in that moment, the space, the temperature, the humidity, everything in a physical space affects that performance. And absolutely miss it with all of my soul. What has kind of kept me inspired is trying to hack how can we create art at this time, and then working with people like Jean to say, well, let's make a film. Do you know how to make a film? No. Let's find people that can help us make a film, because that's what we should do right now. And then we're all of a sudden reimagining our creative output, how we speak to one another, how we are visualizing this narrative that we're trying to tell about Lafcadio. So I think the way I've stayed motivated is just to try to build upon skill sets and creativity that doesn't live on the stage, that we will bring to the stage later. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I think adding to that, I think so. There's something that the pandemic has taken away, and then there's a layer of art that it's taken away, and a layer of art that it's offered. And what it's offered is that space to sort of brainstorm and gather all your ideas. And I love that part of art making, and I feel like I have that more in abundance right now. And then there's that interim section of technician logistics, get it done, make the thing happen on the date it needs to happen. And then there's the other layer, the last layer, which has been really hard, and that's more of an improvisatory, interactive, reactive experience that you have with humans. And every performance, even if it's like a straight up classical performance, you feel the audience. Each audience has its own flavor and color, and you feel them. And even if they're totally quiet, there's a different kind of quiet from audience to audience, and you get your energy from that, and shift how the tiny little nuances of how you change what you're doing according to the energy that you feel from the space is something that I cannot wait to re-experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a few more questions here. From Deb Siegel, she says, how does it push you creatively to need to present virtually? How different when you won't get feedback from a live audience?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is just pushing us, period. I will share the first live online concert I did. I had an expression of emotion right after it. I had an intern in the room. She pressed the buttons. She was the only one there. And I just remember we turned the cameras off, and I just, I had a huge exhale of emotion, because I still felt like I created art, and it was like just a couple months in after maybe June. And so everything was still raw, and we were trying to figure it out. And I just realized, I just have to push myself, and we have to figure this out, because one, I need to play, I need to make. And I think humans want to experience art still. And where you are all those who are listening, and the Friends of Chamber Music Troy are attesting to that. So I think it's just said, this is going to be hard, artists, figure it out. And I think, it is hard. We will say it. It is hard. But we're trying, and I think, Jean and I, Jean and 410 Media made a film that we didn't expect to make. And we have a new expression of art that would not have existed if the pandemic didn't. So I think there's also going to be a lot of that, like artists pushing themselves to create outside of their primary skill set, which is just wait, that's really great though, because we're using our music energy to create visuals, and that's going to push it in a direction that someone who maybe studied filmmaking wouldn't necessarily go. So I think I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues just really, really bursting into new directions, which is very exciting.
Yeah, and I'll just add that even though we're not performing in front of humans, there's performance anxiety,
Mm.
and that performance anxiety still very much exists. Even if that person is just a little black box with a name,
Yes.
or it says grandma. I've had before. But I think I used to do this thing. I get very nervous for performing, but that fuels into an excited adrenaline. So I've learned to embrace it. And I'm grateful / a little bit mad that it still happens
Yes.
when I'm performing on Zoom and I feel the need to put like a post-it note over that name that kind of makes me a little nervous.
Right.
They're still there and it's still very much a real performance, even if you're sitting with your pajama pants on under your performing shirt.
Yeah. We've never done that. Yeah.
So we have a comment from Charlie Krasinski. He says, "I think people can sense a performer's excitement and energy. Pavarotti and James Galway, and you both have that."
Oh,
That's a lovely compliment.
thank you. Thank you, Charlie. That's kind.
So, and we have a comment from Fred Buckland for Jean. Jean, when and where was your relative in Japan? And was it Nagasaki?
It was Matsue mostly. He traveled around, but he settled in Matsue and then also in Tokyo. Those are the two places that I know of. There's a third that I'm forgetting, but so you can still visit the Koizumi Museum in Matsue.
So Lafcadio Hearn's Japanese name was Koizumi, I should say. And yeah.
That was the original name of the piece, as I recall, right?
Yes. We originally named it Koizumi, but have shifted just as art does. So it's now called Descended.
Well, with that, it is 8:38 and I've kept you over, but I am so excited to see Descended on Saturday. And I thank you both for generously giving your time and connecting with us here in Troy, where it's chilly and dark.
Same here in Boston, and I'm sure Wisconsin, Madison.
Probably in Wisconsin too.
Yeah. One day I'm going to settle somewhere that is not this far north. Not anytime in the near future though, but thank you so much, Jennifer. Just thank you. You've been amazing to work with over this past, crazy time, and your support and the opportunity to share this art means a lot to us. So thank you.
Well, thank you both. It means a lot to all of us too. And thank you, Friends of Chamber Music audience and those who are zooming in from further abroad. And I appreciate all of you this evening. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.